The challenge here is that shifting that ideology, learning to, I'm just going to step and look at this from a different angle, that is so much harder. That is so much harder than these practical things that we're normally doing. So much harder. It's so much harder to say, you know, maybe the problem isn't that low-income parents don't care about education. Maybe the problem is that we don't care enough about low-income parents to create educational equality, right? Just looking at it a different way. We'll talk more about that example in a second. Oh yeah, it is there. Okay, so again, this is not about evil racist educators. John, who was seeing it wrong, was not an evil racist. He was a good guy. He was someone who cared deeply about all his students. That's not the issue. The issue is about learning to see what we're socialized not to see. Those little subtle ways in which racism and class inequity persist, even when we have all these people working on equity. Just these little forms of heteronormativity, just these little ways in which, and these little grinding ways in which gay and lesbian students or gay and lesbian parents or caretakers just get this message, these subtle messages over and over. You don't belong here. You don't belong here. So I think sort of what we need to start with, my experience working with people around these issues is there are sort of two commitments to how we will enter the conversation that are critically important. One of them is humility. So that goes back to what I said earlier, that if I think I have this all figured out, then that's pretty good evidence that I have none of this figured out. So that level of humility, the world probably isn't the way I imagine the world to be. Second is a willingness to grapple with cognitive dissonance. Okay, so I'm just going to put the questions up here, and then I'm going to see what you all think the answer is. A Princeton study of elite universities found that legacy applicants, usually white and wealthy folks, are far more privileged by legacy status than applicants of color are by affirmative action policies. The study determined that legacy status was equivalent to how much of a boost to an applicant's SAT scores. How many of you would say 20-point boost, 90-point boost, 120-point boost? C is a, oh, is it? Did I have that right? 160, I just said it wrong. Okay, yeah. 160-point boost, right? So again, perception, again, ideology. We need this information so that we can counter this notion that some people are getting special benefits, as though the most privileged people haven't always been getting special benefits, right? Affirmative action for white people.
Just curiosity, how old is that study?
I believe that was like 2011 or so. Yeah. So interesting that you mentioned that, though, because of some of this sort of critique, some of the Ivy League schools, or some of colleges and universities across the country decided to start making SAT scores optional, taking those tests optional. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, how much more likely are African American and Latino mortgage applicants to be turned down for a loan than white applicants, even after controlling for employment, financial, and neighborhood factors? How many of you think it's 30% more likely? 60% more likely? 90% more likely? So, see, some of you just picked the worst possible scenario. The world is so unjust. It's C. I know it. In this particular case, it's 60%, which is still atrocious. But again, think about poverty and why poverty exists. If I don't have room for that sort of explanation, that sort of unequal distribution of access and opportunity, right? I need to create room in my consciousness for that.